We build in foreign countries. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars outside of our nation. But we can't build a road, a highway, a tunnel, a bridge in our own nation. And we watch everything falling into disrepair. It's time to rebuild our country, to bring back our jobs, to restore our dreams. And yes, it's time finally to put America first.
So that earlier today, President Trump touting his infrastructure plan in Cincinnati. It calls for $1 trillion in spending on bridges, roads, and other projects. And the leadership from both parties have shown at least some signals that they may be willing to work with the White House on this, on infrastructure. Our next guest actually sits on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the Democratic Congressman from California, John Garamendi. Is that true, Congressman, that there's room to work with the White House on infrastructure?
Oh, absolutely. This is something we have to do. It's something that the Democrats and I have been calling for forever, all the way back to the stimulus bill, which frankly had too many tax cuts and too little money actually spent on infrastructure. But going forward, yes, we have to do this. Can we do it? Yes. And one more thing the president didn't say at this time, he has before, and that is all of that steel, all of that concrete, all of those electronics, all of that must be American-made. Buy America, use our American taxpayer dollars to buy American-made goods and services.
Now, this really does sound like, at least from your point of view, you could get, you get something done. If anything, sometimes Republicans, as you know, are unwilling to go as far because they're concerned about spending too much money. But tell us what's realistic from what you heard from the president and what you think yourself. What's realistic on infrastructure?
Well, what I think is realistic is a $1 trillion program. Remember that movie, Show Me the Money? Therein lies the real question here. Where is the money coming from? I don't think anybody around here should be interested in just running up the deficit. That's not where we are, where we were back in the great crash in 2008-9. Yes, we did need that, and yes, it did happen. But we're different now, so where is the money coming from? The president has not raised that issue. We do know that the tax cut issue may actually make it impossible to fund all of this. If it's tax reform where we do not reduce the revenues but rather do away with the unnecessary and useless tax loopholes, then we need to find the money perhaps from that source. There's the repatriation of dollars from overseas. There are ways we can fund this. We need to make sure it happens.
It sounds like you're talking about holding back on some of the aggressive tax measures the Republicans have been calling for as a way to get infrastructure done. So, we'll see how the back and forth goes on that. But how much back and forth can we see, just big picture, this administration? The other obvious breaking story we've been covering here on the show today is the now released testimony of the former FBI Director James Comey tomorrow. And, as part of that, the president apparently talks about a cloud over his administration where he can't get anything done. Now, you're telling me maybe the Democrats can work with them, but up until now we haven't heard much in terms of working together. The president would argue it's the Russia investigations kind of hanging over things and holding things back. What do you say?
Well, it certainly is. The scandals that confront this administration are unprecedented. It took Nixon 7 years before he found himself in trouble. This administration's found himself in trouble day one. And there's a whole host of questions out there that are clearly making it difficult to move forward on critical issues, whether it's this infrastructure issue or tax reform or even health care. All of those are fundamental issues that we need to be addressing. Certainly we need to improve what is known as Obamacare. Certainly we need an infrastructure that is robust and meets the needs without driving up the deficit. There is a role for privatization, but we need to be careful here. It may just be another way of adding fees, otherwise known as taxes, to the general public in a way that might actually be more expensive.
Real quick, Congressman, because this has been a good discussion on the issues, but you did bring up that there have been more scandals here and used the Nixon reference. Watergate, I know they always say the cover-up was the story, but there was a crime. There was the break-in at the Watergate complex. In this case, was there a crime? Because as inappropriate as some of these conversations may have been between Mr. Comey and Mr. Trump, some say it doesn't rise to a level of, say, obstruction of justice. What do you think?
Well, certainly there's a question of obstruction of justice. That means this halls, you can't walk down the halls without hearing that word. But there's something going on here that's really critical, and that is we have former FBI Director Mueller that is conducting a very thorough and comprehensive look at all of these issues. and the FBI does criminal investigations. So we'll see what comes of all of that. There's another very, very important point here, and that is how do we protect our democracy from interference from Russia or any other players, and there are other players out there that could interfere with our democracy.
Right.
That requires a thorough public investigation of what happened, not looking at the criminal issues, but rather looking at how to protect our democracy going forward. How do we, now the issues of hacking into the way in which we tally votes, those are really fundamental. So we need to really have that kind of nonpartisan investigation. Can the Congress and the Senate do it without too much partisanship?
We'll see.
Big question.
Congressman, thank you. John Garamendi, the Democratic congressman from the state of California. Just